Okay, so teachers are kind of assholes sometimes. With great power comes great responsibility, right? And college professors, especially for kind of niche fields where there aren't a lot of students, for example, physics, it's kind of doubly so because there isn't a lot of accountability, because there isn't, you know, if you're teaching like an intro to anything class that's got like 400 people in it, then you kind of get kept in check because there are so many people who are paying tuition, who are taking your class, that if you do something that's like sufficiently fucked up, then there's a good chance that you're actually going to be held accountable, because hordes of undergraduates, including people who are like pre-med students who are like really obsessed with, you know, their GPA and shit, and who are still have like close ties to their parents, will get really mad at you because you're either not teaching the content or you're giving them a bad grade or whatever. And if there are like hordes of those people, then collectively they can complain, and the department will actually like do something about it because they don't want to get in trouble, because they're being threatened by parents of students who are like, you know, this is messed up. However, if you're in a class with like 24 other people and it's like a niche, you know, like a senior level course in an obscure subject, or maybe just a non-populous subject like physics, that doesn't really exist. You can kind of just do whatever the fuck you want, unless it's really fucked up. So, I had this professor, and he wasn't a fantastic professor. I would say that this professor had a god complex. He was very indulgent, and I've heard some stories about some people in the chat who have had professors whose priority isn't necessarily to enlighten the students in the relevant field to like the greatest extent possible. He'd just come in and he wasn't really like an expert on that particular field. He was a really, really good like researcher. He was really, really well respected, and he kind of pioneered a lot of, he like developed resources for like kind of physics, quantum physics meets like computational chemistry that actually like a lot of people use in the field. And he's like very well published. He's well known. He has like a solid body of work. And so he actually had like a decent amount of kind of sway with the department. He wasn't the chair, but he was like up there. And he was teaching this undergrad class. And it wasn't a very important class. It was like mathematical physics or something like that, mathematical methods of physics. And he didn't, I'm sure that he knew a bunch, at least at some point in time, but he was teaching a subject that he wasn't like super intimately versed with, where he couldn't like derive all of the things that he was teaching us, and he didn't make an effort to like take really detailed notes and prepare his lectures or anything like that. So it was overall a pretty low quality class, but he didn't give a shit. He just liked being a professor and, you know, kicking the door open and like kind of just freestyling it, you know, just like waxing lyrical about particular subjects, like a series of subjects that are barely strung together thematically, that don't make a lot of sense, just because he liked to kind of hear himself talk. At this time, Samet was either a freshman or a sophomore, I don't remember, in college. So it was one of my first 2 years. Fuck it, we ball. Yeah, that was this guy pretty much. He is kicked the door in, swang his dick around, and expected us to be impressed, right? And I took issue with this. I've always been passionate about pedagogy, about teaching, about like, you know, I've always been really critical of my teachers in a way that was like, not pure. It was like, I had a lot of constructive criticisms, and I just expected a lot out of my professors because I was really passionate about teaching and I felt that I was really good at it. Big pedagogy fan, that's right. Big fan. And so we would get into arguments. And I was still in my like academic nascency, at least in my secondary education, you know. It was like my first year, or I think it was my second semester, I want to say. I might have been a sophomore, I don't remember. Might have been my third semester. But I was a bit of an asshole insofar as it was more important for me to belligerently argue what was like right in my eyes then regardless of semester, regardless of the practical repercussions, right? Like, basically, he would just say some ignorant shit that didn't make any sense from like a physical or a mathematical perspective, and he didn't give a shit. And I would argue with him, and I'd be like, raise hand, actually, what you said makes no fucking sense. And to be fair, I wasn't an asshole about the way that I did it. I wasn't like, hey, fuckface, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 3, plus ratio plus L plus you're bald. Don't care, didn't ask. I wasn't like that. I was like, oh, well, Professor so-and-so, I believe that's incorrect because it makes absolutely no fucking sense. I should have, though. I shouldn't have. That's not the right. And so what happened was he would get really indignant, right? He'd be like, no, I'm not owned. You're owned. And he would like argue with me even if it was clear that I was right. And I knew what I was talking about. I wasn't just like throwing bullshit around. He would do this a lot for like mathematical subjects, and I was also getting a degree in mathematics, and I was like, I've got the receipts. I can tell you, like, this is for real. And even if I proved him wrong in a way that he couldn't get around, with just like a contradictory argument, he would be like, well, okay, yeah, I guess like technically you're right, but like that's not the point. The point is that I'm not wrong. And so at first it started being, just like sort of purely academic disagreements, which is fine. And then they got more and more heated, like it got more and more personal. And I wouldn't back down. I was like ready to keep being like, and I mean, to their credit, a lot of my classmates were like, well, he's not wrong. And the professor is an asshole, but also this really was, it was like week after week, there were like a dozen lectures straight where of the, whatever it was, 75 minutes of lecture time, maybe like 15 minutes of it was lecture, and the remaining hour was just like heated, vicious verbal debate between myself and the professor that was growing in like animosity over time. And I kind of took the hint, even though like if we actually took a lot of what he was saying that was wrong to heart, it would be detrimental for our like academic knowledge of what was going on, right? And I didn't like mind. I was like, I fancied myself a good debatist, and so I was a master debater, if you like. And I was like going in hard, and I wasn't like getting tired. I was like, I could do this all day. And eventually I was like, you know what? I gained some like over time self-awareness. I was like, okay, like realistically it's happening, because I was like, oh, well, back to the grindstone. I'm ready for like my 60 minutes of debating this person about something that he obviously has like no leg to stand on in. And I was like, as much as, it's important to me that the authority on the academic information here isn't just spouting complete nonsense, I'm also depriving the other like 24 students in my class of a class. You know what I mean? Like ordinarily what they'd be doing is listening to this bullshit. We'd be like getting through a sorted, it wasn't really working out of a textbook, but they'd be experiencing more material, and it wouldn't be as much of like a waste of their time, even if like the information that they were receiving was somewhat questionable. So I felt bad. I gained some self-awareness over time. People mature. Like I wouldn't be that belligerent in a class now for like the practical reasons of like consideration for my fellow students, right? You turned each lecture into a cement stream. I'd love that in my lectures. I could play thoughts and crosses while the debate is going. Yeah, God, I would have hated you in my lectures. No, exactly, right? Starting to reach a fuckface mode. My grad program. I had a history teacher who'd get really indignant as well. Philosophy teacher only accept his own opinions as answers. There you go. Everyone's met these professors, right? Passion for a topic is an excellent thing. I mean, I agree, but still, I thought I don't want Poison to fucking hate me in, her lectures. And so I thought, okay, I just won't go to class, because it's not worth it to me, because like I already know the content. I mean, no flex. It's just like I've either seen it before or like they're not getting very much done. If I didn't know the content that he was trying to teach, then I couldn't have these debates with him anyway. So it's just not worth my time, even though I was trying to be a good student and go to classes that I like already was familiar with the material in, because, you know, that's like self-discipline, that's like organization, right? I would have had so much fun watching that. It's not for everybody. Let me say that. You went to a chillchiatrist and got some chill pills, something like that. So I stopped going to the class. The professor took this super personally, and we had like a really cool student, like an undergraduate student lounge in the department that was like a room that had like a bunch of tables and couches that was like reasonably sized, and all of the physics majors would hang out there, and we would do all our homework there. We would just hang out there like after class, between classes, before class. It was like a really chill place, and it was like a really important space to me. It's actually the reason I'm doing my physics PhD, is because the other 2 degrees that I got, my math degree and my computer science degree, didn't have that type of like that space, that camaraderie, that like organized located forum for interaction with like social interactions with my fellow, you know, students, right? And so I used to spend like all my time in there. And everyone knew that because everyone spent their time there. And so I didn't go to class. And the professor got like really, he took it really personally. And he was like, because he's got a God complex. And he was like, oh, so this guy thinks that he's too fucking good for my class, huh? And so he was like in his class. And this was toward the end of the year that I decided to stop coming to his class. He waited in his class for everyone to show up, namely for me to show up. He didn't start lecture until I showed up. There are like 24 other students here, right? These poor fuckers are sitting in their seats waiting to try to learn because they're paying for a fucking degree for this professor to teach them this shit that he doesn't actually even teach them. He gives them the opposite of the correct information, right? Like, this man who spent 60 minutes once arguing with me that the infinite sum of -1 to the n from n goes to like minus infinity to infinity is 0. 0 is like the only wrong answer for that entire, like, it doesn't make any sense. He was like, no, the answer is 0. And I was just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Anyway, it's not important. Specifics aren't important, okay? Specifics aren't important. He waits in his class like 10 minutes for me to show up. I don't show up. He asks the class, like, where's Samet? And they're like, I don't know. He's like in the lounge. He was like doing homework or something. And so he leaves his classroom, walks down the hall, kicks down the door to the undergraduate lounge, and looks for, he's like, where's Samet? And I like poke my head out from behind my book. I'm like, yo, what's going on? He's like, why aren't you in my class right now? And I was like, I've got homework that I need to do. So I'm doing my homework. And he's like, yeah, but right now is my class time. Like, you should be in my classroom right now. It's my class. And I was like, I understand that. It's, you know, like but I'm doing this instead. And he was like, really combative, and he left. And this was maybe like the 3rd time that I had skipped his class or something like that. And it was near the end of the year. And he was like gonna fight me. he was clearly, he was like seething, and he was like really upset. He was like yelling at me. And I was like, bro, I'm trying to like disengage. I want to de-escalate the situation. This is so that I don't sit there. I'm trying not to actively undermine your professorship, right? That's why I'm not in your class. Like, take a fucking hint. And so this is what he does. I get your point, but have you considered that I'm not interested? So I don't go to class another like 2 or 3 times. He's doing review now for like the final exam, okay? And this is what this fucking psychopath does, because he's a psychopath. God, that prof is literally the NPC meme. He tells the other students in the class, the final exam is going to have this one question on it. He printed out a proof in a textbook that was unrelated to any of the work that we had done up until that point, or like things in the syllabus. He told everyone in the classroom, he said this: here is this printed like proof of this problem. Everyone who is currently here in this class, which was everyone except for me, gets to take a copy of this proof into the final exam with them. And the question, the only question on the final exam will be, or, you know, one of the only questions, there may be like 2 or 3 other, you know, token questions. Recreate this proof, and you'll get to have the proof. Nobody outside of this classroom is allowed to take anything with them into, this is like your extra bonus preparation for attending this class right now. Nobody else is allowed to know about this question. If I find out that anyone else outside of the classroom is like privy to this information, then I am going to fail. You know, it was basically a scorched earth. He was like, I'm literally going to fuck your shit and there's nothing that you can do about it. So he was basically like, everyone except for Samet gets to take this proof into the final exam. And if I hear that Samet knows about it or has a copy of the proof with him, then you're all fucked. That's literally exactly what this guy said, right? It was insane. Like, it's actual insanity. So, what if you already had the information? I don't know what to tell you, man. It was like a random page out of a random textbook. It was like tangentially related to. People didn't tell me about it. I didn't know about it in advance. Which, like, fair enough. You know, my classmates didn't want to fail, and I was like head and shoulders above everybody else in like all of my grades for all of the exams and stuff. So they're basically like, not my monkey, not my circus, man. Like, which, like, I respect. I think that's fine. I go into the final exam. It's like maybe 2 problems that are, you know, like some bullshit. And then like 80% of your grade for the final exam is prove this. And that's it. I finished the exam. I had like a math degree, and so I knew how to do the proof. It wasn't super trivial, but I just figured it out, right? Like, I did it. And he also did this sociopathic thing, which was he like gave out everyone's exams, and he said, when you are finished with your exam, bring it up to me to submit it in my office. He left the final exam area. Everyone had these papers and everything, except for me. And he was like, I'm going to leave and let you guys do the exam, and I'll be in my office. Which is like, okay, cool, why not? I did the problem like myself. I just did it. I didn't have the paper that literally had the proof on it. And I was like, this is weird. This isn't what I learned in this class, but I already knew how to do the problem, so whatever. I go up to his office. And he, like fucking Kevin Spacey or something, actually he bore some physical similarity. There was a resemblance. Is sitting at his desk in like his chair, legs crossed. I knock on the door, it's cracked. He's like, come in. I open the door and it's just him with his big fuck off wooden desk. And he's just sitting there. And he's got a grin on his face like a sociopath. I submit to him my paper. He takes it and he rifles through it and he sees that I solved the problem, right? Like the impossible problem that he gave everybody like a cheat sheet for. And he looks at me and he's got like a wild look in his eye. And he was like, you couldn't have solved this problem. And I was like, what are you talking about? So I don't even understand what's happened yet. Like, no one has told me. And he was like, there's there's no physical way that you could, like, you have cheated on my final examination, and this is like a serious, you know, this is like fucked up. And I was like, he was like, who gave you the answers? Someone had to have given you the answers. And I was like, I didn't get the answers from anyone. I did this problem. I didn't have to justify myself, but I did. I was like, listen, I can derive to you the proof of this problem from like first principles. It's not even written like more than the proof itself. I was like, I've like more than was available on the page. I was like, I've taken classes on this, whatever this was. I don't remember. Maybe it was like a real analysis proof or something like that. But I was like, I can show you, you know, similar work that I've done for my other classes. Like, I solved this problem. It wasn't that hard of a problem. And he was like, this is unacceptable. And I was like, are you going to accept this paper or not? And he was like, yeah, I'm going to accept it. You know, like, you can leave now. And I was like, okay, cool. I had no idea what the fuck I had just experienced. And it was only afterward that students in my class came up to me and they were like, yeah, so like what happened? And I was like, I don't know. He was like a psychopath and he told me that I cheated. And they were like, okay, well, here's the thing. He wanted to screw you. He like gave us all the answer to this problem or whatever. And they were like, yeah, like we're going to tell you, but also there's no way that you were going to fail. And like, you don't fuck with crazy. And like, we didn't want to eat any of the, you know, like everyone knows everybody else really well. He knew who my friends were. I mean, I kind of knew everyone in the class, but they were like, we thought you'd be fine. And I was like, you know what? I was fine. It was easy. I think they also probably kind of understood what the, you know, like when they got the paper, they were like, oh, so I can just do this. This is fine. So fast forward like 3 weeks, grades are due for this class. All right. I'm just waiting for my 4.0 for this semester that I worked really hard for. Not as hard as you would expect. I get an F in the class. I failed the class. Actually, you know what? I think I got like a C-. So technically I passed, but I had like 100% on everything and I outperformed everybody else. Like it was clear, right? And I was like, Monka S? Monka W, perhaps? What's going on? And so I sent him an email and I was like, hey, Professor so-and-so, I don't know what happened, but like, I think there might have been a mistake. So if you want to check my grade or whatever, crickets, nothing, radio silence. He doesn't respond to my email saying, hey, you fucked up. And so then it was only at that point that I started to put, because I knew that he was petty and he had a god complex and he was an asshole. So, but I didn't believe that he would do this because it was like awful, right? Like this is just like a beyond. And so I'd started to put the dots together. I was like, wait, this guy's like serious. But I gave him the benefit of the doubt even at that point. I was like, listen, this guy can't actually do this. He's probably jeopardizing his like career in some way. So I'm just going to send him like an email a week for like 3 weeks. And then hopefully this will get, because I don't want to go up the ladder, and maybe there's like a he said situation where somehow I get fucked on this. I can't believe that would ever happen. But if I had to like in a academic court, like represent myself, I just wouldn't want to do that. And he never responded. So I was like, okay. I went to the TA who I knew. He was like an upper class student who I was like friends with. It's like, hey, can you like testify in writing that I got like 100% in all of the homeworks and the previous exams? If we had any, we might have had a single take home midterm. I don't remember, but he graded everything because it's not like the professor was going to do any work. And he was like, yeah, no, you're like the one person who solved like everything. And I kind of used your work as like the answer key a lot of the time. And I was like, great, would you testify in writing? And he was like, absolutely, yes, like 100% I would do that. And then I went to the rest of my classmates and I was like, hey, would you guys testify that I ran circles around everybody and that there's no way that I could have underperformed anything that you guys did because I helped you guys. I like taught you guys the content for the exams. like to study. Like there were a few times where people would go into the student lounge and like set up chairs in front of the chalkboard, and I would explain to them how to do all of the problems on the homework or the study sheet or whatever. And they were like, yeah, no, we'd do that. I compiled all of this into like a document, and I went straight, I did an email. I emailed like the provost and the chair of the department and the dean of the college and like the ombudsman and the ombudsman's like cat and like the janitor and like the stray cats that like to hang out near the warm like air compressor for the building's heating system out back, and like all of this, right? And I put together an email and I was like, I believe there's been a mistake. This was my grade. I have all of this evidence that I need. I have like the written testimony of the TA who graded everything that I got 100% on everything. So mathematically, it's impossible for me to have gotten the grade that I did. I have like copied I have all of my graded homeworks like returned to me. I've like collated them and I've scanned them, and I've got like all of this shit. And so this is like an urgent matter because like the grades can only be changed for like so long before they're like locked in stone, and you have to go through some like insane process to like actually get anything altered, and all this shit. And he responded within like hours of me sending that email to everyone who could actually like pose a threat to his career. And he responded saying, oops, it looks like I typoed when I was submitting the grades. It's fixed now. And I got the grade that I deserved, which was like an A. Which is like, it's just crazy that I had to go through that, right? This guy's just the worst. Before all of this, by the way, at the very beginning of the year when I was like doing really well, he invited me to his office and he was like, hey, this is what all my research was on. Come work for me. And I was like, that's really cool and I appreciate the offer, but I'm kind of like doing work with another professor right now. And I was nice about it. I wasn't a dick about it, even though I thought his work was really boring and stupid. I was nice about it. This is like the preamble to him being an... So like there's also some, I'm sure, resentment from him feeling rejected because I didn't agree to work with this man, right? For his research or whatever. Anyway, so that happened, okay? I had this awful, shitty experience with this person, and it was a nightmare. That was the preamble to that real story, which is this. So a friend of mine, a buddy of mine who I know, who went to the same department like years later, okay? We were shooting the shit. And he was like, yeah, so I got this cool internship position where I was going to do a summer internship on a really cool project with this professor where he was going to take me... Yes, shut up, Sonoy. He was going to take me to China to do this really important... You know, it was like a really cool... It was like 2 students were going to go with him to China. He was going to fly them out, and they were going to do some like really cool research project or whatever, right? And I was like, okay, that's dope. So what happened? And he was like, well... They told us that we couldn't do it, and like the plans fell through, and it was bad. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Which professor was that with? And he was like, it's Professor so-and-so. And I was like, oh, shit. Like, why didn't it work out? What happened? And he was like, well, he is now in federal prison. And I was like, what? I mean, like, I can imagine why. But what? It was like, yeah, Professor so-and-so is in prison. And that's why I couldn't go with him to China to do work. And I was like, what for? And I was like, well, apparently he was like scouted and drafted into some program called like the 1001 Talents program or something like that. And he was employed by the Chinese government in a program where they were trying to get people who are like professionals outside of China to come, you know, work. They were trying to like attract foreign talent, you know, trying to like diversify and globalize and just get people like on their side from like the outside. Professor so-and-so was chosen and was being given like a huge salary that he didn't report to anyone in like the US. Nobody knew that for years he had been getting money from China. And he was imprisoned for like selling sensitive intellectual property to the Chinese government. He was imprisoned for treason. That's and it was going on for years and no one knew, and eventually they caught him, probably because it's difficult to launder money like that. It's probably an IRS thing. And he was like, yeah, it really fucked with my summer plans. Because that's what I was going to do over the summer. I had like this great internship opportunity, and then it fell through. It didn't work out, and I felt like shit. And I just thought, like, man, full circle. I wasn't surprised. But also, the important thing is, he didn't need the money. He was doing really well. He got like royalties for a bunch of shit. He owned like a farm where he grew hops. He had like a beautiful family, and he was like making beer in his spare time. He was like living it up. He had a good thing going for him. And he threw it all away for some China money. I mean, in retrospect, maybe the hops belong to China. I don't know if they can seize the assets like that. The treasonous money. But yeah. It's like, how's that old professor doing? I never got along with him. And he was like, he's all right. He's in prison now. So yeah. That's the story.